Lockdown, ladies and gentlemen of Kings Nympton. Hello again, and welcome to this week's contribution from your friend and mine, the one, the only, Roland Sanders.
Hello again, here I am again. It's the 5th week here of the coronavirus and things are going along all right. It's a sad day really because it's the anniversary of Uncle Will's death. I don't know if you remember, it was in the papers about 10 years ago. He died while he fell into a 500-gallon vat of Sam Inch's cider at Winkley. And when they told Auntie Alice, she said, she was very upset. And she said one thing she wanted to know is, did he die with dignity? And they said he died very dignified. She said, how's that? They said he got out 3 times to go to the toilet.
Roland Sanders.
Well, I must have been dreaming. Anyhow, Bert's trouble with drink was such that he could hardly get a job sometimes. So once he went on a big job search. And he applied to Mr. Roberts, who was in the rectory then, to be an handyman. And he went for the interview and Mr. Roberts said, can you do electricity? He said, no. He said, can you do plumbing? He said, no. Can you do painting? He said, no. He said, can you do gardening? He said, no. And Mr. Roberts says, what makes you an handyman? He said, I live next door. Anyhow, he was first apprenticed to a butcher in South Molton. But he got a sack after the week for trying to hang up the mince. And he sold a lady a leg of liver. So things weren't going so well then. But he did try to get a job. And finally he got a job with Mr. Roberts again. And he said, I'll give you a workout, Bert, if you like. I'll give you a chance. I want you to take this tin of black paint, go around the front and paint the porch. So he did, and he came back about half an hour later and he said, I've done that. Mr. Roberts said, that was quick. And he said, yeah, I've done it properly. He said, oh, by the way, it wasn't a Porsche, it was a Ferrari. He then tried other money-making schemes. He went on to watch Antiques Roadshow. And they said, if you go in the attic and you can find something which might be valuable, bring it along and we'll value it and give you and tell you what it is. So next time Bert arrives, a great parcel, damps it down on the table. He said, right, how much is this worth and what is it? And they said, that's worth about £14. And he said, well, what is it? They said, a hot water tank. And then he came back 2 or 3 weeks later and he had a painting and a violin. And the expert said, oh, this is very good. He said, what you got there, you know, is a Stradivarius and a Rembrandt. Oh, says Bert. He said, oh, how much is that worth? And the expert said, about £14. He said, why is that? He said, well, Stradivarius was an awful bad painter and Rembrandt couldn't make a violin to save his life. Anyhow, so it went on. But then, you know, I suppose he lapsed into his old ways in the farm and he made a bob or two. But drink still was behind it all. And I remember once he came back from the pub, drunk as a lord, and he crossed the cobbled square and he could see the light in the window upstairs. And he threw pebbles up to Mary Ann to let open the door. And she opened the window and said, go away, you beastly heller. Oh, he slunk across that cobbled yard. The rain was horizontal and the snow was coming down and the wind was blowing. And he went into the farrowing pen. And there in the farrowing pen was his great big old sow lying there, snoring away gently. And he looked about, it was cold outside, it was raining and he was cold. And the straw looked inviting and the old sow was snoring gently. So he lay down beside the sow and started running his fingers up and down, just for someone to do. But he must never forget that Auntie Ivy used to forgive him a lot of things, and when she realised he'd gone to the farrowing pen, she came downstairs and she crossed the cobbled yard with a candle guttering in the wind. And she opened the door. And there she saw Bert and the sow, and just before she said anything, Bert turned to the sow and said this. He said, Mary Ann, we've been married for 40 years, and I never knew you had buttons on your nightdress. Anyway, I'll see you next week. Keep well, keep indoors.